Hi guys, welcome back to Sleeve Saturday. You know, I've been obsessed with Peter Cetera's voice since I was 6 years old and hearing it for the first time in The Karate Kid Part 2. Obviously at that point in my life, I didn't know about the long career he had had with the rock band Chicago, going all the way back to the late 1960s. Chicago were generally a faceless group in the 60s and 70s. Everyone had a role to play in the band and nobody was really a frontman specifically. Maybe you could argue Terry Kath kind of was, but he died in 1978. So whether Robert Lamm and the rest of the guys want to admit it or not, Cetera was, and still is, the face of Chicago for a lot of fans.
No, we want you back in Chicago. Oh, well, thank you so much.
Chicago was a democracy for the first 15 albums, but of all the records for me, Cetera's voice is the real standout. He's a cocky guy, but let's face it, his voice and songwriting ability are the real secret sauce of this band. I'm not the biggest fan of their 70s stuff, a lot of it was quite proggy and jazzy, and not really my jam, call it my age or call it the era I grew up, but I'm just gonna say it. Those records, Chicago 16 and 17 from 1982 and 1984, are the best stuff Chicago ever done. The latter was Peter's last with the record before leaving the band Under a Cloud in 1985. But I think it's about time for him to come back to Chicago and everyone to just bury the hatchet. What Cetera and Chicago should realise by now is that they are better together than apart. They are all way too long in the tooth for this nonsense at this stage. But can they come back together? It's hard for me to say I'm sorry. Now for all of you that are typing frantically in the comments section right now, calm down. I know that he was pretty much fired from the band back in the day, and I also know that he put a gun to their heads. You know, for more money, more freedom to do solo work, more say in the touring schedule, more power in the band's musical direction, you know, to drop their trademark horn section in favour of a more ballad or AOR direction, with the legendary producer David Foster. I also know that Cetera is 78 years old now and pretty much retired. But what does that matter? People come out of retirement all the time. Michael Jordan with 49 points. What Robert Lamm and the other original guys need to recognise is that all Chicago's most popular stuff was with Cetera and Foster. That's the sound the general public and fans connected to the most, and even now to this day. I like the Jason Sheff era of the band, and Bill Champlin's efforts were just fantastic. But none of it was as great as Peter's era. They know that though. They kept Foster on for Chicago 18 after Peter left and continued that kind of sound into the late 80s.
And it's just a matter of, surviving all the other things that happen.
Yeah, you could argue that Cetera himself doesn't even want to come back. But despite a successful album upon leaving Chicago, he didn't exactly set the world on fire as a solo artist for the next 30 years. Similar to Steve Perry that way. But there is a lot of cutting off his nose to spite his face here. He didn't appear in the Chicago documentary a few years back, and he didn't even go to Chicago's Rock Hall induction in 2016. Man, he's stubborn. He calls it a divorce. I call it pettiness.
People ask me, well, are you going to get back and do this? And it's sort of like asking somebody to get back together with your ex for the night and film it, And I thought it was better perhaps not to go.
Peter said that he retired because he wanted people to remember his voice for what it was, but when we saw him live in Dublin in 2019, he and his band sounded just incredible. In this case, he's very different to Steve Perry because his voice is still intact. He still looked great and had a chin on him like Glenn Ford. He didn't look or sound his age at all. He dug a lot into the Chicago back catalogue, and you know why? Because he didn't have enough successful solo material to sustain a full show. I mean, in this case, his ego was bigger than his back catalogue.
Son, your ego is writing checks your body can't cash.
Look, at the end of the day, between Peter's voice still in good nick, Chicago still on the road, and their most successful material ever still being played in regular rotation on the radio, I think it's about time for Peter Cetera to come back. One final tour with Peter involved would satisfy fans, satiate customer demand, and act as a conduit to bury old wounds once and for all before it's too late. Look, these guys are old men now, and there won't be many more chances. I'm curious though guys, what are your thoughts? So let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.